Hey, just an update. I'm slowing down with videos on this channel for a bit because I really need to put some more time and work into my main channel and my 2 other businesses. Not a big deal, but that's why there have been bigger gaps between videos lately. So, getting right into it. In my last discussion video, I talked about the possibility of family trees being recorded via some kind of personal symbol, and people using that to keep track of bloodlines and keep inbreeding at bay. I don't love the personal symbol / family tree idea. It just doesn't really seem very workable in a pre-literate society, but it was the best idea I had. However, the problem was solved on Discord soon after the video uploaded. It was suggested, regarding the family tree and knowing who is who, could they incorporate specific patterns into their clothing, kind of like Scottish clan tartans. As they move from flock to flock, they could add a new pattern below or alongside the previous ones, so they always carry it with them. I think that's it, roughly, though not connected with the flocks. I think flock symbolism will be better expressed through the beaded shoulder caps. I had thought that the different weaving patterns in the leather would be localized, maybe with certain patterns originating from one winter town or another. But weaving patterns would be pretty simple to learn, so it makes sense for the children to be taught by their parents, and it makes sense for specific patterns to evolve and be passed through family lines. Here's how it might work. Maybe each family line has developed and refined a specific weaving pattern. So maybe your shirt will incorporate strips of the pattern from all 4 of your grandparents, or maybe all 8 of your great-grandparents. Of course, you do always have 2 parent lines, and in Western culture, tradition was to go with the paternal line when passing on surnames. I kind of like to not do that with the Qyaalyon. For them, with the family is the family you choose mentality, I can see Qyaalyon wearing several weaves, maybe up to 8, to represent different family lines. But of those lines, they choose one specific weave to make most prominent on their shirt, and it becomes their family weave to represent the single family line they feel closest to and identify most with, rather than just taking a paternal or maternal default. Maybe they occasionally drop weaves if they have no relationship with the family line or want no relationship with them, and maybe sometimes they also add new patterns based off of their partner or a close non-biological family member. Maybe other patterns represent something else. Maybe there is a former messenger bro weave, and maybe there's a weave to represent the equivalent of CPR certification, like a trained emergency healer weave. Maybe there is a weave to symbolize single mothers, or if your parent was a yin and tae, or a specific physical difficulty you've experienced. Maybe some patterns simply represent a quality or character trait you wish to possess. I think the important thing is all of the weaving patterns should have meaning and symbolism. Nothing is random. You wouldn't add a pattern just because you thought it looked cool. You would know that people will always be reading your patterns to figure out who you are. Also, coincidentally, this helps with the inbreeding problem too. All you have to do when you meet somebody is glance at their shirt. If you share no family weaves, then nothing needs to be said, because if you share ancestry, it's safe to assume that it's comfortably distant. But if you do share a pattern, you can subtly say, "Oh, are you related to so-and-so?" And they can casually be like, "No, but my dad died when I was a fledgling, and this guy really stepped in for me, so I took his family weave." Then you can proceed. Great, now I'm going to have to design all of these weaves. What's a world building rabbit hole but deeper? Like a world building black hole that you never escape from. Related to this, there was a comment that says, "I'm not sure if you should worry too much about inbreeding in the Qyaalyon. Unless a family is routinely marrying their siblings / close relatives, genetic consequences are very unlikely to happen. Cousin marriages don't actually have that high a chance of causing any defects and are still practiced in the majority of the world. I think I read once that only 22 people are needed to successfully reproduce." You know what? You're right. I think I've been overly worried about the inbreeding issue, and really, you would probably know your first cousins personally at least. All you would really need to keep track of are your 4 grandparents. So yeah, I think using the weaving patterns to help keep track of your close extended family should about do it, and I'm not going to worry about it again after this. Although, I am super intrigued by the thing you said about the 22 people being needed to successfully repopulate. I really hope that's true because it's perfect. Have I mentioned that there are 22 gods, 11 male, 11 female? The number 22 comes up a lot, and I had already thought that maybe they started out colonies of new species with 22 members to reflect themselves. So that would just be perfect serendipity. I believe I read somewhere that humans generally like clothing with patterns and contrasting colors due to our foraging first, hunting second ancestors. This would be different for a race that is adapted more for hunting, since their brain would be more attracted to movement rather than patterns. Think instead of liking clothes etched with intricate designs and patterns, their clothing would be more like cat toys with tassels, fringe, and rattle balls. Hey, that's perfect. Their clothes do have a lot of interesting patterns in the weaving, but little color. But they do have rows of fringe and tassels. It makes it make even more sense, because Qyaalyon don't really care about colorful clothing much, and they're perfectly content with plain brown leather. But they find dancing fringe irresistibly beautiful and eye-catching, and they use it even though they know fringe slows down their flight. I just love it. There's a species of hawk called the Harris hawk. From what I understand of Qyaalyon culture, they function similarly. Small groups of 5 to 8 birds work together to hunt and provide for a few or a shared nest, and raise the birds as they get older. The birds even work together to catch prey and will share food. Once they reach maturity, the offspring are kicked out to prevent inbreeding. They will then roam the land, trying to find a mate or a flock. Formed groups will fiercely defend their territory from any other Harris hawk, so maybe some flocks just raise all of their children together. Okay, for one, that's really cool that there is a bird species with such a comparable social structure. Lots of interesting similarities there, and that's why I wanted to read it. For the last bit, I've gotten that question a lot, if the children are raised communally, and sorry, but not really. I answered this over on the Discord too. I said, the mother and father are the primary caregivers. The other flock adults are secondary, like a close aunt or uncle. The communal element exists to a degree because children spend the days gathering with whichever hunters are on rest, not just their parents, so they need to respect and obey the other adults in their flock too. But the family unit still takes precedent, and there are still boundaries. Basically, a flock adult can tell your children what to do on a general day-to-day level, like, come help me with this, don't hit your sister, that kind of thing. But a flock adult cannot interfere with or supersede the parents' wishes on a deeper level. If a flock member teaches their children something you personally disagree with, you don't get to intervene. The exception is if the parents are abusive or crossing obvious lines. Children are raised together in the sense that the flock is like a big extended family, and children spend every day with their parents and siblings, and also their flock cousins and flock aunts and uncles. But they are not raised communally in the sense of all children being shared equally among the flock adults, or of equally shared parenting duties and responsibilities and rights. Would there be bachelor or bachelorette flocks? Probably not. I don't think bachelor flocks make sense in the context of Qyaalyon culture, at least not if we're using the word bachelor to mean the same thing. I interpret it as a flock of young single guys or girls, but the thing is, the flock system is established and traditional. Each flock has a bateau in the wintertown and a storehouse for food and a group of elders that they support and also depend on for preserving and guarding their food. So the flock hoppers really need to be distributed among the different flocks to fit into the system, or they won't have anywhere to go when winter comes. However, the exception to this would be a novo flock, who would need to build a winter bateau and adopt some homeless elders while they tried to get their flock established through the first generation. But that would be a lifelong commitment and a real trial. I can't see anything like a temporary flock of bros just hanging out for a few years. I don't think that there would be anything comparable to a college group, because they're just a very multi-generational culture. On the subject of Qyaalyon considering animal domestication a taboo, what about when animals domesticate themselves? I thought the Qyaalyon might be okay with it because technically they're not forcing the animal to do anything. They just decided to follow by themselves. The problem I see with this is in the migration. Because Qyaalyon fly to new locations so frequently, a land animal, let's say a coyote, wouldn't be able to keep up with the same group. You could make an argument for birds following the flock long enough to self-domesticate, but I'm not sold on it. However, the next avian group I want to work on are the cormorants. They are fishers along the hot northern coast and do not migrate. If they still have a similar value structure to the Qyaalyon regarding free will, they would probably be okay with those types of symbiotic animal relationships growing. Their moral boundary might be with training. If you teach an animal to obey you, or if you have to hit the animal or put a leash on it or do anything to get it to behave, then you're violating the animal's free will. But if you simply live alongside it in peace and it trusts you and you build a relationship with it, they might find that permissible. But I'm okay with giving the Qyaalyon a more extreme take on anti-domestication and just saying hard no to all, as if they have a slippery slope caution about being friends with animals. Maybe they're afraid that if they befriend an animal, somebody else might come along and take advantage of that trust and then domesticate the animal. But also, Qyaalyon do move around a lot, so I feel like animals self-domesticating would mostly be a non-issue. But maybe there's a kindly old guy living in a winter town, and maybe he sneaks off to go feed scraps to a particular coyote sometimes. But he keeps it a secret because he knows that it'd be frowned upon. He feels a little guilty, wondering if he's doing something wrong by making the coyote dependent on his food. So maybe he tries to stop going, but then he worries and feels even more guilty and sneaks off to check his coyote. Just because something is taboo doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. This question is asking about the Qyaalyon's biome and what animals and plants live on the plains. I don't want to answer it because there will be a whole video on that eventually, and I'm still gathering and developing ideas. I highlighted it though because there was something interesting in it. Animals keep the forest at bay by knocking down trees, such as elephants on Earth, or grazers such as deer and gazelles and bison. Okay, the plains do have herds of a type of antelope, which we've discussed before. Also, there was, up until very recently, mammoth herds. So there you go. I didn't even know that was a function of grazers, but it all works. Interestingly though, the grassland ends at the base of the Jade Mountains, and that's where the forest begins. Maybe, in the time since mammoths disappeared and the antelope herds have diminished, the forest is beginning to creep inland. Maybe not by much, maybe not even a noticeable amount, but it would be a slight, subtle indication that Qyaalyon culture is just a few decades past its prime. Would war/grudges be a huge thing, or are the Qyaalyon peaceful and all that stuff? Yes and no. I would say that on the large scale they are peaceful, but the smaller the scale you go, the more violent they get. Children are especially aggressive and fight all the time. Adults have calmed down a bit and mastered a little self-control, but they will still definitely get physical to solve a conflict. Like I've mentioned before, physical fights are about proving dominance, not seriously hurting or killing another. But on a larger scale between flocks, maybe sometimes things escalate and two flocks develop a grudge against each other, but the other flocks in their winter town would not stand for fighting that spills over to impact others. You could say that they use low-level fights to let out aggression, hoping that things don't escalate to real battle. Basically, they are cool with low-level fights, but they do not like damage, and they especially will not tolerate damage to uninvolved innocents. Related to that question, how would Qyaalyon react to other races expanding? What would happen if other races colonized their territories? Okay, the reason I think Qyaalyon need to be peaceful on the large scale is because they are overpowered. Any flying race will be inherently overpowered. Avians could rule the world if they decided to. Maybe the gods knew this and taught them to value others' free will in an attempt to keep them from becoming militarized or imperialistic. Maybe Shakoba taught them that little fights are okay, but to avoid wars and deaths, and maybe that wasn't to protect the avians so much as it was to protect the other races. Maybe she tried to deliberately neuter their psyche. However, though the Qyaalyon haven't taken land beyond their borders, they will defend their territory. So far, Enosi expansion has pretty thoroughly boxed the plains in, but the Qyaalyon have not had to deal with their own territory being colonized. But that can't last forever. A thought from Discord. The interactions between winter towns and flocks probably help rein in extra unique flocks. If a flock becomes shunned as punishment by all of the winter towns, then they'll need to adapt their lifestyle somehow. Will they attempt to migrate all year round? Or maybe even remain stationary for a few years and attempt to establish their own winter town? Will they even be able to trade with the other Qyaalyon? Will their children be able to join new flocks when they've grown? I'm not sure how well extremist ideas will incubate, or at least spread, once a flock gets to a point where it no longer has access to the winter towns, which is a good thing. It's like the system self-corrects. I have nothing more to add. Great point. The interdependency among the different flocks and the need to get along when you are together would definitely keep flocks following some kind of baseline standard, which would probably reflect the 3 core values we discussed last time. Would any of the avians have personal holidays, like a birthday or join the flock day or a marriage anniversary? Actually no, for one main reason. Qyaalyon don't use calendars and they don't keep track of specific dates. They tend to think in terms of seasons. So like, your birthday isn't February 3rd, your birthday is midwinter. Time in general for the Qyaalyon is very intuitive, but very vague. They can approximate about an hour or about a minute, but they have no real idea and they don't particularly care. So about the vocal cursive, it's not exactly the same, but my second language, Malayalam, has a formal and informal way of speaking. Informal is what people use for day-to-day communications, while formal is used for things like the news or other important documents/presentations. This is really cool. There were quite a few comments about birdsong, but I highlighted this one because it most clearly explains what I was trying to imagine, plus how Qyaalyon might use it beyond just storytelling. I'm still not sure exactly how their languages would go. I'm definitely not interested in conlanging an alien-human-bird hybrid language. I mostly just want to figure out how it works enough to describe it in the story. I'm thinking right now that the language might have started off as Navajo. There is an in-universe justification for that, but I don't want to get into it right now. However, the language has had time to evolve and incorporate an avian's alien dual vocal system. Navajo is tonal and heavily reliant on vowels, which I think pairs well with an avian language. I think birdsong is essentially the same language, but a formal version, sung through the syrinx, but the words still formed in the mouth. So yes, the above comment helped me better understand how birdsong might function in the culture. I've been thinking about children's toys recently for the Qyaalyon. Maybe something woven from grass, like a cross between a kite and a frisbee? The idea would be to toss it into the air to try and jump and catch it before it hits the ground. That is actually a perfect idea for several reasons. Qyaalyon parents would be super choosy about the toys they let their children have. Everything must be worth its weight to carry. A grass frisbee type toy would be super lightweight, and it's a high energy game, and fledglings have a lot of energy to burn off. So a parent would be like, I can add 2 additional ounces of weight to my bag, but in return I get an extra hour of sleep every night. Worth it. Also, this is great because jumping up to catch a toy would be the perfect move to help fledglings develop launch muscles in their legs to help with takeoffs as they start learning to fly. But they would also use their wings, flapping up to get more height, which would help develop early flight muscles. Grass frisbee, A+ Qyaalyon mom approved toy. Other toys might be some kind of inflatable ball, slings so that children can practice their aim, learner's bows and arrows for older children. Maybe there's some kind of equivalent to a deck of cards, something that is small and lightweight but that you can play a lot of different types of games with. The only equivalent I can see to a board game is if there was a few tiny figurines or dice and the board was painted on the backside of a fur that they were already going to be carrying. Something like board games or card games would be useful on rainy days when the fledglings are stuck in their little family bateaus, but generally parents would want them to be outside playing, burning off energy. I think it would be cool if they had a sport, kind of like Quidditch. Maybe capture the flag or something sight-based that uses their superior vision. I like this idea. I'm not sure what game it'll be exactly, but there should be something. Maybe the jump up and catch a frisbee game evolves into something else more complex once the fledglings begin to actually fly. A frisbee especially is interesting to me because it would float more slowly through the air than a ball, so there would be more time to fly and swoop in to catch it. I like the idea of the hunters in a flock forming a team that plays matches when they meet other flocks around a wellspring, or holding games and tournaments during winter in town. Completely ridiculous, but the owl avians as assassins or mercenaries. Almost like a mythical group of quiet flyers that if they see you or your flock as a threat, come quickly and quietly. I am so far from working on owl avians, but you're making me want to skip ahead. Stop it! I love these ideas. Did owl avians originate in a forest, hunting at night? Did they develop these ninja skills to aid their hunting? Did they begin to strike out into the wider world and find a ready market for their specific set of skills? Or do owl avians resent being stereotyped as ninjas and everyone always assuming they were born knowing martial arts? Ahem. Will there be penguin avians? I have been asked this in literally every single video and I ignored it, but now I feel bad. I'm sorry to disappoint you. At this time I have no plans for penguin avians or any other type of flightless bird avian. The punishment for severe crime should be the removal of their wings. This is one of the most common suggestions I've gotten and I am just so confused. A wing is a limb? Do you commit a crime and get your leg chopped off? I mean, losing a limb used to be a punishment, but we consider those times and places to be pretty barbaric. And the Qyaalyon do not embodify every single modern standard of civilization, but I definitely feel like they are several steps above permanently mutilating criminals. Also, a wing isn't a limb. It's like the connecting thread of their entire species, and every aspect of their culture depends on flight, and they're pretty sure that the soul lives in your wings. Sorry, I just don't think cutting off a wing would ever be a reasonable retribution for any crime. The Qyaalyon are fine with execution, but wing removal would be like cruel and unusual punishment. They would view that as we view having people drawn and quartered. No matter what they did to deserve it, if you cut somebody's wing off, you would be the villain. You would be the baby-eating serial killer in the Qyaalyon's eyes, and they'd probably kill you. That is one thing that I can see the Qyaalyon going scorched earth over. If they found out that an extremist flock was doing that to anyone, I think that it would be reason to band together and take them out. Okay, well, I feel like this one was slightly more negative. There were some new interesting ideas to discuss, but I felt like I was doing a lot of just refuting ideas I don't like. Sorry about that. The next video will be about Qyaalyon houses, the 6 winter towns, and the subcultures that have developed in each Qyaalyon territory. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more of my work, you can subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow my Instagram. Don't forget to check the description box if you want to join the Discord community and explore more lore. And I also have my main YouTube channel for sewing and another Instagram for that. See you in a couple of weeks. Probably.